domestic violence spreads across every income, every race. I may say it's indiscriminate. There's domestic violence issues in minority communities, majority communities, high-income neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods. So it's very indiscriminate. So, yes, I experienced it, I saw it, I witnessed it, but it's not restricted to any socioeconomic strata at all. Well, in 1978, you would think that you would introduce legislation to strengthen the domestic violence laws, that it would be very well received. And generally it was. But I had law enforcement officers out of the Panhandle tell me that we didn't need a law because domestic violence was a family issue. In 1978, you had some of that Neanderthal thought process going on. And my response was, no, women aren't chattel. They're not property. You don't own them. You can't treat them badly. We're going to strengthen the law. So we passed the law, and it was well received once it got to the floor of the House. And we not only passed the law to strengthen the domestic violence laws in the state of Florida, but we went on even recently with a part of the Domestic Violence and Child Abuse Commission getting two pieces of legislation passed even 3 years ago. One dealt with no contact orders. Oftentimes when somebody's arrested and charged with domestic violence, they would get on the phone, they would threaten the abused, they would cajole them, they would beg them, whatever it might be. But now we pass legislation and say there's no contact once you're arrested. And then secondly, we had a big issue with the GPS monitoring. Sometimes you would put somebody on GPS monitoring to keep them away from the survivor. And then what would happen, they would just dismantle the GPS device, but that was only a violation of the court order. So we passed legislation that now makes it a felony. So you could be charged with simple battery, let's say, a misdemeanor, first-degree misdemeanor, and put on GPS monitoring to keep you away from the survivor so you can't do any more harm, including death, because the homicide rate is up 17% in Orange County as regards domestic violence. So now if you take off that GPS monitoring device, it's a felony. Having experienced domestic violence growing up, having been exposed to it growing up, getting involved with the original Spouse Abuse, Inc., the predecessor to really a Harbor House, and meeting again with the survivors and hearing their stories and hearing the stories of those children, collateral damage seems to be so a euphemistic treatment of what it really means. It's not collateral damage, it's serious, long-time, and threatening damage to these children. So to put it in the context of the years of the legislation and the programs and securing funding for domestic violence shelters and then trying to improve the system, but keep going back to putting a face on it, looking at the survivor and their needs and their struggles and how do we mitigate against some of the struggles that they have. So it's been my pleasure and distinct pleasure to be involved in this issue, and then I will continue to be. So passions don't just go away, right? And they get reinforced every time we meet a survivor. So I'm blessed to be able to be involved, and I'm happy to be involved. I am passionate about this issue, domestic violence. I want to stay in the trenches with the community at large and Harbor House with this fight. As long as there's one person being physically abused, mentally abused, neglected, and there's an impact on the children, we got to stay in the trenches with the community. We got to protect these people.